Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the A to Z CFB podcast. Today, have a pretty fun episode. We had some pretty big news happen this week, so we have more to discuss besides just the top 25 as we see it here at A to Z CFB. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So the biggest piece of news that I think obviously every single person and their mother has heard, even people that I didn't know watched football, were still very, very familiar with the James Franklin firing. I think that that's what everybody has been talking about. That's what everyone wants to talk about, despite the fact that we had some other big names like Trent Dilfer through tears getting fired, which I'm being a little facetious right now, but the point being, James Franklin getting fired has coined what I have been referring to as the Terrell Pryor effect. Those who may remember a John Boyce YouTube video about, I don't know, 10 years ago now, where they talked about when Terrell Pryor popped off for 1,000 yards as a receiver for the Browns, and the Browns quarterback went down. He was both the best receiving option and the best quarterback option, but obviously could not do both. We have a very similar situation here where James Franklin firing creates both the best head coaching prospect and the best head coaching position open that obviously cannot be married because they just got divorced. So I thought it'd be fun to think of some ideas of who could replace James Franklin. And I want to say right now, my Penn State fans, I've gotten a little pushback from this on TikTok and Instagram. So if you're not following those, you can go check out the fun and watch me argue with various Penn State fans while they attack my character on in the comment section. Um, but no, Kurt Cignetti, I don't believe is leaving Indiana to come to Penn State. Sure, yeah, you can throw a bag at him, and there's a price for everybody. But in this day and age, right this moment, Penn State is not a better job than Indiana. Not especially not with what Curt Cignetti is building there. Those who know anything about Curt Cignetti uh, must have to know in a recent interview, right? An interview that was like last week, a couple weeks ago, when asked about his recruiting tactics, and I was able to turn some of these guys who were either overlooked or not as recruited into superstars, is that he talks about his development of players. So the benefits of Penn State, the benefits outside of literally him making more money, and I imagine Indiana they got a lot of money out there too. They could definitely match some pretty big deals. Indiana, it doesn't the benefit of recruiting better doesn't really mean anything in that context because Curt Cignetti is doing this with three stars, 2 stars, and no stars, right? He's not doing this with the necessarily the cream of the crop, all those 5-star guys that that James Franklin had at Penn State. I think that a big part of this is he talked about this himself in his interview that he was able to he's part of the job of being a head coach is developing your players, and he has really mastered that art of developing players. Therefore, he doesn't really need to recruit at that same high level. So I think that no, it's a very, very far-fetched idea for Curt Cignetti to come to Penn State. Now, the next guy I would say, and I would say if you told me this 3 weeks ago, I would have called you crazy, but that's going to be Matt Campbell from Iowa State. I think Matt Campbell right now is a little bit of a dark horse for the job. I think he's a very, very good head coach, and I've been singing Iowa State's praises all year until this last couple of weeks when they have effectively proven me wrong about their discipline, about their resilience, because this is a team that looks like a shell of their former selves, and with a lot of his big players like Rocco Becht leaving and his wide receiver crop that just left the year before, he might not view that he has as much keeping him in Ames, Iowa, as maybe it would have seemed just a few weeks ago. So I think Matt Campbell is definitely a big option there. Next, another Matt Rule. Matt Rule, being at Nebraska, already in the Big Ten, kind of sees what this landscape looks like. And I think that, he's in an interview himself. He's talked about, look, he grew up a Penn State guy, went to Penn State, met his wife at Penn State, but I still don't know if it's going to be enough for him to leave, what he is building, what he's worked very hard to build in Nebraska, a top 25 team right now that is, better than what Penn State's doing. And so I think it seems a little far-fetched for me for Matt Rule to leave, but it wouldn't be out of the question. Next, I think they go potentially with a coordinator. I think someone like Brian Hartline I know he's at Ohio State. And I was talking to an Ohio State fan earlier today. He was like, Brian Hartline would never leave Ohio State for somewhere like Penn State, but flash a few tens of millions of dollars in front of a young guy who's never had a head coaching opportunity before, and see if he doesn't take one, especially not one from Penn State. Finally, my dark horse, someone that I think would do it really well with the resources specifically there. I'm going to go with Casey Keeler. He's the current head coach at Temple, and they're 3-3. But this is a team that was really, really bad last year, and he's already surpassed what they were able to accomplish last season, and is and has turned himself into a very, very solid, uh, contender, I think, for this job. He's a little on the older side, but he did a lot with Sam Houston State at the FCS level, including national championships. And he to me screams like he would be the really, really good option for this head coaching job. I think even if he doesn't get it, I think there's a huge chance he at least interviews for it. Those are some of my bigger ones right now. I think that Old Dominion's got a nice head coach down there that could, whose name's escaping me right now, who could be a really, really good option. You got like Jeff Monken at Army, who seems to, he's been there forever, seems to be doing some really good things there. So there are plenty of options out there. Just depends on which direction Penn State would like to go. Whoever it is will probably have a lot of pressure very quickly. All right. The Heisman ladder after this last week. Number three, moving up, is going to be Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback from Indiana. It's very, very difficult, which we'll talk about here shortly, to win in Oregon, to win up in the Great Northwest in Autzen Stadium. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And he just did it, and he did it very, very well. Number two is Ty Simpson. He's throwing players open like he's an NFL quarterback. He is placing the ball very well. And granted, he has two NFL wide receivers, but he's like filling in, right? He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's looking the part. I think at the very least he's going to be shooting up some draft boards here soon. Finally, I still have Haynes King at my number one. I know they didn't play this week. I'm sorry, they did play this week. They didn't play last week. They beat Virginia Tech 35-20. They are Haynes King just continues to be, one of the best quarterback options in the country, and both with both his legs and his arm, and what he's doing with this team. That like this team has no quit, and I think he's been a very vocal leader in that locker room. My honorable mentions. All right, my honorable mentions for this week are going to be Nebraska, UCLA, Navy, Northwestern, and Illinois. Really wanted to put Nebraska in there, but it really came down to Nebraska versus Texas, and I think that this win over Oklahoma is just a little bit more of an impressive win than anything Nebraska's done this year. Same with Navy. Um, but I definitely could see an argument for any of those, Navy, Nebraska, or at Texas, to be that last team in there. I guess so. Without further ado, number 25 is the Texas Longhorns. I know the AP put them all the way at 21. I think that's a little ambitious for them at the moment with what they've done this year, just finally coming into their own a little bit. This is one of the best coach games I've seen by Steve Sarkisian, in the last 20 games or so, basically the last 2 years since his time in the SEC and a little before, where I think that look, Texas is obviously a very talented team, and kind of their talent profile is what's keeping them here. And I don't love that that's the reason why, but it's a little hard for me to justify them not in the top 25 right now. Number 24 is going to be UNLV. It's a 6-0 team who just keeps finding ways to win. They're winning by any means necessary. They had an absolute ESPN classic thriller against Air Force this last weekend. Go 51 and 48 was the final score. And look, they got a really big win, really big game this week against Boise State. That is going to be a rematch of the Mountain West Conference championship. And I think that if they can come out of this on top, they are absolutely the clear favorites to win the Mountain West and could even make a real push for the uh, for the Mountain West championship, be the playoffs, perhaps. What I meant to say. Number 23, the Utah Utes, a 5-1 team that just absolutely routed Arizona State, I'm sorry, 42-10. Now, Arizona State was starting Jeff Sims. It was definitely not their best showing, but Utah looked like a really, really put together and good team, the kind of team that I have been expecting to see from them all season. And with their cross state rivals BYU coming in this next week. They got the Holy War coming. I think there's going to be a great opportunity for Utah to crawl their way back into the national spotlight and right back into the race for the Big 12. Speaking of the Big 12, number 22, the Cincinnati Bearcats. This is another team that it has gotten better as the year has gone on, and you can tell with this win 20-11, a really gritty win over a relatively scrappy UCF team, and someone in Cam Fancher who really did everything in his power with about an offensive line about as useful as a piece of paper against gamma radiation. But Cincinnati is just getting better and better every week, and it feels like, every time they get better, I want to move them up. And I know they lost to Nebraska, so it feels a little weird having Cincinnati up here and Nebraska not. And it's probably has to do something with recency bias in some capacity. But recency bias does have some merit, right? Teams get better as the year goes on, and I think that if Cincinnati and Nebraska played again, it would probably be a much better game from both ends. Number 21, the Vanderbilt Commodores. 5-1. They did not play this last week. They did move up a spot, but that was more because of teams moving down or out. Um, they have they play host to LSU this upcoming week in what is a very tough end of the year for them. Four of their next 6 weeks are going to be ranked SEC opponents. Um, but look, they had a whole week to marinate on that Bama game. And again, I think they need to do what they did in the beginning of the year that got them to 5-0. They need to shut up and play football. That is all that has been stopping them this whole time. Diego Pavia spent the whole pregame practicing his kneel downs and arguing with Bama fans. He can't do that this week when he plays LSU. He can't do that later down the road when they continue to play these really good teams. And they play Mizzou the week after, right? They are going to have to he's going to have to keep himself level-headed and be better than that if they are going to be a at all competitive team down the stretch. Number 20, we the Missouri Tigers, another 5-1 team, and I just mentioned them. And honestly, the only reason why they're even a spot above coming off of a loss to Alabama is because they handled Bama way better than Vanderbilt did. I think there is a clear difference between the way that Missouri played football last week against Alabama and the way that Vanderbilt played football last week. Bo Pribula is a very talented quarterback, and although he gave Ryan Williams a little bit of the cold shoulder at the end of the game, I think that and that was a very immature thing. I think I have faith in Coach Drink and his ability to get his guys right. I think that this is a team that is feisty, is scrappy, and I'm really excited to see what they can do down the stretch. And in 2 weeks we'll get the battle of the Bama younger brothers, right? We'll get Vanderbilt versus Missouri. Uh, Number 19, that's gonna be the South Florida Bulls. South Florida, they heard the noise. They felt the blackout. They felt the energy in Denton, Texas. It was probably unmatched anywhere else in the country on that Friday night. And hell, they canceled classes in North Texas to prepare for this game. This was the first time that North Texas has ever had a sold out football game in their entire FBS experience. And you know how South Florida responded? They hung 63 on them. That is a very impressive thing to do. Look, the Mean Green held it very close. It was for pretty much the entire game up until the second half started for the first half of the game, right? Second half started and South Florida was like, yeah, we're clearly the better team and we're going to prove it. And a 63-36, nice little palindrome score, domination by South Florida, who will get a chance to play probably what will end up being an an American Conference pre-match against Memphis here in a couple weeks. Before we get there, though, we have number 18, Oklahoma. Now, I know I had texted at 25, Oklahoma at 18, and I don't necessarily love that when I have to put teams who just beat other teams ahead, but it's kind of how it fell this week. And I think I'm giving them a little bit of slack because of it was just very clear that John Mateer was not himself. Honestly, I think Oklahoma probably would have been better if they just started Marcel Reed in this game. Oklahoma, look, they listen to their quarterback, and that's never a bad thing, right? Listening to your quarterback, and if I was Oklahoma, I'd do it again, right? If I'm listening to my Heisman hopeful quarterback after he's missed a couple weeks, he's ready, he's working, he's rehabbing, he's getting himself back into shape to play in what is widely considered the biggest game of the year for Oklahoma and Texas fans alike, the Red River rivalry. Uh, and he says, I'm ready. I want to play. This is what I want to do. You listen to that guy. I know it didn't work out that time, but just because you make the right decision and it turns out wrong, or you make the wrong decision and it turns out right, doesn't mean that initial decision was not initially correct or incorrect. It just didn't work out that way. I think there's absolutely a universe where Oklahoma comes out there and wins the game. Now, I'm not making excuses. They lost the game. It wasn't particularly close either. They lost 23-6. It wasn't like they were. There was a point where they were dominating, and then all of a sudden there was a shift change, right? Oklahoma is just kind of got, in my opinion, unlucky in this week. And that's why they're still higher than Texas. It was also a combination of me not wanting to put Texas any higher than 25th, and thinking that Oklahoma was better than being the 25th team in the country. Might not make sense, but it's probably how it's going to work out right now. Not probably, it is, because it's my decision. Number 17, the USC Trojans, probably one of the most impressive, definitely not the most impressive, but one of the most impressive wins of the week. USC going from what was unranked, by my poll, 2 weeks ago or last week, to now ranked 17th after an absolute butt whooping uh, when hosting Michigan this last week. Look, they clearly, Sharon Moore is not Jim Harbaugh. And I know that there was the suspension stuff at the beginning of the year, but Jim Harbaugh spent multiple weeks suspended in the national championship run, and either it's the players aren't as good now or the coaching isn't as good. And Bryce Underwood is probably an overall more talented prospect than JJ McCarthy. Not that JJ McCarthy wasn't talented or a good quarterback, but from a pure physicality standpoint, Bryce Underwood's probably better. Now, I know he's a true freshman. I know there's a lot to work off, but this defense is just slowly and surely in Michigan looking worse and worse, and not like the defense that would bind teams and slowly suffocate them into a loss. No, this is a team that clearly cannot handle a Lincoln Riley offense, which is a tough offense to handle when it has a Caleb Williams or a Baker Mayfield or a Kyler Murray on there. And right now, Jordan Mailata is looking like he's looking right on par with all three of those. USC faithful, the Trojan faithful are finally seeing the Lincoln Riley team that they, with a little semblance of a defense, I want to add, that they have been looking for since the massive buyout from Oklahoma. Number 16, we just talked about these guys, the Memphis Tigers. They moved up, but it was more of a, they didn't play this week. It was more of a result of them, of teams going down, I'd say, right? Like the Oklahomas falling below them, several teams falling out of the rankings, Missouri falling lower. Um, Memphis, undefeated. They were the first bowl eligible team. And after about this weekend with this upcoming weekend with a Trent Dilferless UAB squad, they get to do this, what I was saying a minute ago with South Alabama, this potentially pre-match that will ideally be not ideal, but it could definitely be the precursor to the American Conference Championship that could honestly be the decision for who makes the playoff right now. I think Memphis has undoubtedly played like the best group of five team. Um, but there's definitely some argument there for some other teams that could supersede them at some point. And whoever comes out of this game, I think, in 2 weeks will likely be the group of five representative in the college football playoff. Speaking of the college football playoff, number 15 is Notre Dame. And frankly, I don't love that they're this high, but I didn't really know how to justify them any lower. I couldn't move Memphis up a whole 5 spots for not playing at all this last week. USC being right back on this list, it was hard to put them top 15 initially. And even Oklahoma, like dropping them right there felt like a pretty, not better than USC, probably still better than South Florida kind of move. But Notre Dame uh, is 4-2 right now. They just had a pretty dominant win over CJ Bailey and the NC State Wolfpack. And I think they're going to be keep doing this to a ton of these teams that they play because they already lost their hard games of the year. Now, the games that they've lost are looking very, very respectable, like I say every single week. And I think that the CFP committee will obviously give them the benefit of the doubt just because of what they did last year, because of their brand, their Notre Dame. And if they do end up destroying the rest of their opponents, and we see CJ Carr is even a potential Heisman candidate at the end of the year, which is not out of the question, then I think they will undoubtedly be in the college football playoffs as an at-large bid. Obviously, they can't be a conference winner. Number 14, another team that, kind of didn't play this week, but not kind of, they didn't play this week, but has been doing some pretty solid stuff throughout the year and showing a lot of promises, the Virginia Cavaliers. Now, that Florida State win did not age super well after they lost to Pitt last week, but Look, Virginia's high-powered offense has been really, really impressive. They had an off week to think about their uh, they had an off week to think about everything that had happened a couple weeks ago, what they've gone to so far. They're 6-0, and they got Washington State on the horizon, a team that just took Ole Miss down to the wire with the ball at the end of the game in Oxford. So I think if they handle Washington State with more grace than Ole Miss did, I think that you can absolutely make an argument for this 14th and even potentially higher spot if Virginia continues to win these games. Number 13, that's going to be the Oregon Ducks. They took a loss this week in Autzen, as in my opinion, the number two team, but I think ranked the number three team, 20-30 against Indiana. Now, if you told me this 2 years ago, I'd have been like, what the hell is Indiana doing beating Oregon in Autzen? But knowing what we know today with Kurt Signetti and never doubting that guy again, it's really hard to argue against it, right? Against him. Now, Oregon, this is probably one of the best losses of the year, right? If not the best loss, right? We got both the best win and the best loss of the year out of the way in this game. This is still a very, very talented team. I think, frankly, what had happened was Dan Lanning got out coached, and Indiana was just a more disciplined and better team, controlled more TOP, were absolutely just driven and wanted it a little more than the Oregon Ducks. Now, I do think that this was very possibly a pre-match for the Big Ten championship, which, we still got an Ohio State in the way of that. But I do think that Oregon is going to climb back into the top 10 and probably beat some teams pretty bad after being, I mean, I'd be pissed if I was a Duck right now. Number 12, that is going to be the Tennessee Volunteers. They did not have a phenomenal week, in my opinion. And I think that any outcome that they produce is expected. Now let me explain. The Volunteers won this game without winning time of possession, having lost the total amount of yards, significantly more penalties, and even punted three more times than the Razorbacks. The biggest difference is Arkansas fumbled three times, and Joey Aguilar had a very clean backfield to operate. So I think that Tennessee's key to victory right now is keeping the pocket clean for Joey because he does not make that many mistakes and letting the offense operate. Because right now, the offense is not operating at max efficiency. And I think that it could operate better if they had more sustained drives, which is being hindered by the rushing attack. Defensively, they're definitely not what they were last year. I guess the loss of James Pierce and company is just not not working out that well. And I guess, what Jermod McCoy is probably their best shot at a first round pick this year. So I think that Tennessee right now is in a weird spot where they could be a top five team if they play to their potential, or they could lose the next six games. And frankly, I wouldn't really be super surprised in either direction. Number 11, BYU, a 6-0 team who just beat Arizona in Tucson in double overtime. This is a team that is very scrappy and finding the way to do it. And Bear Bachmeier is still playing like one of the best freshmen in the country. The problem is this week they have to play a very, very angry Utah team. Not a Utah team that I'd probably want to play personally. But hey, they're probably the betting favorites going into this because look, they're undefeated. Utah's lost the game, and BYU is ready for this holy war. I don't know if they ever started a true freshman in the holy war before, but it would not surprise me if this was a first. I think this is going to be a really, really good game, and this will be my game of the week this upcoming week. So I'm very excited for it myself, and I think this is going to be a huge indicator at this point as to who will play in the Big 12 championship. And again, Utah's really hungry to propel themselves back into the Big 12 race and back into the national spotlight. And BYU is super excited to prove to some people that their 6-0 record isn't a fluke and that they actually are a contending team this year. Number 10, the LSU Tigers. They won 20-10 against South Carolina in a pretty ugly hosting of the Gamecocks. This LSU offense with Garrett Nussmeier is really, really struggling. Now, their defense did a really good job of shutting down Lenora Sellers and company. I think that this defense, for the first time in maybe Brian Kelly's tenure, is better than the offense, right? This defense has kept them in games and frankly is the reason why they won this game because Garrett Nussmeier couldn't keep the ball on his side of the field. This was a guy who was expected to go top two, top three overall this upcoming draft. And I just don't think that he's exhibiting that talent. And frankly, I said this 2 years ago that I wasn't a big fan of his, but That was 2 years ago, and I always give players time to develop. And he's still young. He's still a young guy. He can absolutely still develop. But LSU was still a top 10 team, even with a relatively lackluster offense, because that defense is so darn good. Number nine, the Georgia Bulldogs with another pretty sloppy win over Auburn. Look, a win is a win. An ugly win, a pretty win, any sort of win is a win, and it was away in in the Deep South's oldest rivalry, or a rivalry game, down in the South, deep down in Auburn, Alabama, right? Um, and with you go look at that video and tell me if you think Kirby was calling a timeout, or if he was afraid or if he was arguing defensive delay a game based off the clapping, but. I think that Georgia just kind of almost in a similar vein of Tennessee, just very clearly needs to um he very clearly just needs to figure out his team, right? His team needs to get figured out in a way that can do things like beat Alabama, like comfortably beat a Tennessee, like comfortably beat an Auburn if they're going to actually be a competitive program this season. Number eight, that's going to be the Ole Miss Rebels. They actually moved down because of this win in Washington State. And most of the time, a team wins, and you're like, "Oh my God, good job!" Not this week. This was an ugly win. This is the ugliest win of the week, I think. Um, they had Washington State, a team that starting Zevi Eckhouse, who was didn't even they didn't even want to start at the beginning of the year against an Ole Miss team that just beat LSU, right? Just beat another top 10 team as the underdog, and they were in a position for Washington State to control the game and win it. That's not something that a top five team should do. That's not something that really a top 10 team should do, but they are still 6-0. I mean, I hate to say they're an SEC team in some capacity. And I think that they'll bounce back, right? Every team has its down weeks. And if your down week still results in a win, that's pretty good. Number seven, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Kind of talked about them a little bit already. That is going to be the Haynes King squad. That is going to be number seven. Another 6-0 team, probably my number two team in the whole ACC. Uh, Look, they had a 35-20 win versus Virginia Tech. That is a still talented team, albeit not having a head coach sucks. But any win, especially in conference, is still going to be a big win. And I think, and they handled them pretty well, right? That defense could definitely be a little more stout, but Haynes King always comes through. He almost always comes through. And even in like that Georgia game last year where it went to 9 overtimes, he still almost came through. I think Georgia Tech is going to be just fine. I think they're going to bounce back in a pretty major way down the stretch. Number six, almost cracking the top five. This is going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. Frankly, look, all credit to them beating Missouri. Although they gave Missouri the ball with a chance to win it, all credit to them. They beat Missouri. Missouri's a very good team. They're in this top 25. I think you could argue them even higher. I think that if Florida State they don't throw the game against Florida State in the beginning of the year, we are talking about Bama as potentially the number one team in the country. And I don't think that that's a crazy take. They are, I think, from a talent perspective, the best team in the country. They have the second best offensive line by my standards in the country, and Ty Simpson is playing like an NFL quarterback with NFL wide receivers in an NFL system, right? Kalen DeBoer has found something really, really special with this Ty Simpson guy, and he has been very, very good, making the throws not just to open space, but throwing his receivers open, putting the balls in great positions, and leading both Cornell Tate and Ryan Williams into very, very, very advantageous positions. It's not really his fault when Ryan Williams just can't catch the ball. Into the top five. Number five, that's going to be the Texas A&M Aggies, another 6-0 team with a pretty dominant win over Florida. The Florida team that just beat Texas, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Texas A&M is looking really good. But they have been. They always look good. They always have been looking good for years now. They've always had the money, resources, funding in order to look good and be good as a program. The problem has always been coaching. And this year, Mike Elko seems to have figured it out. He's gotten the keys to the castle. He knows what he has to do. And he's doing it, right? 6-0, few SEC wins under his belt. I think that Texas A&M is going to be a force to be reckoned with, if you will. Keeping it in Texas, though, number four, the team that I think will be playing essentially the winner of the Holy War in the Big 12 championship, that's going to be Texas Tech. The Red Raiders, also 6-0 with a 42-17 domination over Kansas, with a backup quarterback for a lot of that game. Look, they continue to blow out every single one of their opponents. That's just what they do. right? They their lowest point win margin, their lowest margin of victory has been 24 points. That is crazy, right? And this is they're not just doing this to like Arkansas Pine Bluff, right? They're doing this to Big 12 in conference opponents. I think that this is a team that could stack up to any team in the country pretty comfortably. Number three, the team that I think had the most impressive win of the week and maybe the most impressive win of the year, not maybe, the most impressive win of the year, and that's going to be the Indiana Hoosiers, a 6-0 team that has proven to me that I will never doubt Kurt Cignetti ever again. They beat Oregon in Autzen Stadium. Dollars to donuts, the Northwest is the hardest place to play in college football, and Kurt Cignetti didn't care. Look him up. He wins. That's what he says. He just look me up. I win. That's what he does. He wins. That's all he does. And this Indiana team is just going to continue to do that. I'm not sure what their blue chip ratio is, but I bet it's a lot lower than the number two team in the country, which is Ohio State. Um, Number one team is Miami. So we'll just talk about them collectively, right? Because I think you can very easily argue these as one and two, one A, one B, flip them back and forth, whatever. Because both now, especially with this win on the road at Illinois, is an absolutely very impressive win. And that is probably the closest I've come to putting Ohio State number one in the country all year. But the Buckeyes being, 30 being undefeated, winning in this capacity are very, they're probably they could be my betting favorites right now to repeat for the 2025-2026 season. And I think that Jeremiah Smith is probably a shoo-in for the Biletnikoff Award. And number one in the country, as I already said, that's going to be Miami. They didn't play this week, but they're coming off of a big win after traveling to Tallahassee. And they got, frankly, their biggest challenges are behind them. They have a lot to work with. Um, for a beneficial end of the season, right? They have the ability to win all of these games, right? Nothing will be as hard as what they've already done, and in my opinion, should cruise to the playoffs as a number one or number two team, assuming they can beat what I'm guessing will be Georgia Tech in the ACC championship, but whoever makes it. Whew. All right. That was another super fun, super awesome time going back over this last week of college football and looking forward to the future. We had some Tuesday night football and we have some Wednesday night football tonight. So if you haven't already, go watch some football this week. Enjoy, and I'll catch you all next week. See ya.